Trust your body. That's what my mother used to tell me when I was learning to read the water, to feel the rhythm of my stroke, to know when something was wrong, even if I couldn't name it. I'm Rose Miller, 25 years old, and I should have listened to her voice that morning at the Phoenix Aquatic Center. The pool stretched before me like a sheet of polished glass, lane ropes cutting perfect lines through the chlorinated blue. 6 months until Olympic trials. This time trial would determine everything. The final sponsorship deals, the training budget, whether I'd get another shot at the dream that had carried me through 10 years of dawn practices and sacrifice. I adjusted my goggles, the familiar ritual steadying my nerves, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Strange. I'd done this 1,000 times before. The metallic taste coating my tongue was new too. Sharp and unpleasant, like I'd been sucking on pennies. Probably just nerves. The pressure had been building for weeks. David, my stepfather, reminded me daily about the financial investment riding on my performance. The sponsorship meetings, the media attention, the weight of everyone's expectations. "Ready, Rose?" Coach Martinez called it from the pool deck. His weathered face showed the same intensity it had for the past 3 years of training together. Former Olympic swimmer turned coach. He understood the stakes better than anyone. I nodded, shaking out my arms. Behind me, I heard the familiar click of expensive heels on the wet concrete. Brianna had driven me to practice today, something she'd been doing more often lately. My 28-year-old stepsister had been making an effort to be supportive, a welcome change from years of polite distance. "You've got this, Rose," she called out, her voice warm with encouragement. "I brought your favorite electrolyte drink for after." The starting buzzer cut through the air. I dove. The water embraced me like it always did. That moment of weightless silence before the rhythm took over. Stroke, breathe. Stroke, breathe. My signature 200-meter freestyle, the race that had earned me a full scholarship to Stanford, the distance that connected me to my mother's memory. She'd held the state record in this event before I was born. But something was wrong. 50 meters in, my usual flow felt choppy. My breathing pattern, honed through thousands of hours of practice, suddenly felt foreign. The pool lights above seemed too bright, creating halos that hurt my eyes. I pushed harder, trying to find my rhythm, but the water felt thick, resistant. 100 meters, halfway through, and my heart was racing beyond what the pace demanded. The familiar burn in my muscles felt different, sharper, more chaotic. My coordination started slipping. The smooth rotation of my stroke became jerky, uncontrolled. By 150 meters, the pool deck was spinning, the lane ropes blurred together, and I couldn't tell if I was swimming straight. My lungs screamed for air, but each breath felt insufficient. The metallic taste intensified, now accompanied by a wave of nausea that made me gag water. I barely made it to the wall. Coach Martinez was pulling me from the pool before I could even register touching the timing pad. His strong hands gripped my arms as my legs gave out, the pool deck feeling unstable beneath my feet. "Rose, look at me." His voice cut through the buzzing in my ears. "What's happening?" I tried to speak but could only gasp, my vision tunneling as I fought waves of dizziness. Through the haze, I saw Brianna rushing over with a towel and my water bottle, her face painted with perfect concern. "Is she okay?" Brianna's voice seemed to come from underwater. "She was saying she felt off this morning. Maybe she's pushing too hard." Coach Martinez's experienced eyes scanned my face, noting details I couldn't see myself. The slight tremor in my hands, the way my pupils weren't quite responding normally to the bright pool lights, the grayish tint to my usually healthy complexion. "We're done for today," he announced, helping me to a poolside chair. "Rose, when did you last eat?" "This morning," I managed, accepting the towel from Brianna. "Same as always?" But it wasn't the same as always. Nothing about this felt normal, and the more I tried to convince myself it was just pre-Olympic stress, the more my mother's voice echoed in my memory. Trust your body. Maybe she needs to see someone. About the pressure. It's so much stress for anyone to handle. Coach Martinez's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Let's focus on getting her feeling better first. 20 minutes later, as Brianna drove me home in concerned silence, I stared out at the Arizona landscape blurring past, the Olympic rings tattooed on my shoulder, a reminder of the dream that I'd chased since my mother's death felt like they were burning against my skin. Something was wrong. My body was trying to tell me something, and for the first time in my athletic career, I was afraid I might not be strong enough to listen. The pattern started 2 weeks after that first collapse time trial. Subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Tuesday would bring a practice session where I felt like my old self, strong, fluid, cutting through the water with the precision that had caught Olympic scouts' attention. Wednesday, I'd barely make it through warm-ups without feeling like I might faint. I started keeping a training journal, initially just to track my times and technique notes, but as the days blurred together in a cycle of triumph and failure, the journal became something else, a desperate attempt to find logic in the chaos my body had become.
Day 12. Felt strong during morning practice. Hit target splits for all sets. Brianna made smoothie bowls for breakfast. Said the antioxidants would help with recovery. Day 13. Couldn't finish main set. Dizzy during backstroke drills. Coach pulled me out early. Hands shaking. Brianna drove me home. Very worried. Day 14. Better today. Normal energy levels. Brianna had early shift at work, so David dropped me off. I stared at that last entry for a long time, pen hovering over the page. Correlation wasn't causation. I'd learned that in my sports science classes. But the pattern was starting to feel less like coincidence and more like a map I wasn't ready to read. Family dinners had become minefields. David would sit at the head of our glass dining table, his real estate empire's success evident in every carefully chosen detail of our suburban Phoenix home. His questions always circled back to the same themes: sponsorship renewals, media obligations, the financial timeline we were all operating under. "The Speedo deal needs confirmation by next month," he'd say, cutting his steak with surgical precision. "They're not going to wait indefinitely while you work through performance issues." Performance issues. As if the dizzy spells and coordination problems were just a matter of mental toughness. As if I hadn't been swimming competitively for 15 years, my body as familiar to me as breathing. "Rose is working through it," Brianna would always interject, her voice carrying that supportive tone that had become so common lately. "Aren't you, Rose? The pressure is just intense right now." Linda would nod anxiously from across the table, her fingers worrying the stem of her wine glass. My stepmother meant well, but her own anxiety made her an unreliable ally in family discussions. She'd pop one of her little white pills, Ativan, I'd noticed from the prescription bottles lining the bathroom counter, and retreat into concerned silence. "Maybe Rose needs a sports psychologist," Linda would suggest softly, "for the mental side of training." The mental side. Everyone wanted to explain away my symptoms as psychological pressure, stress manifesting as physical problems. And maybe they were right. Maybe I was losing my mind along with my stroke technique. But then there were the good days. Days when I felt like the swimmer who'd dominated collegiate competitions, who'd qualified for nationals 3 years running, who'd made coaches believe Olympic trials were within reach. Those days reminded me that my body knew how to be strong, how to be precise, how to trust the water. The inconsistency was what tormented me most. "You're overthinking it," Brianna told me one evening, as I sat at the kitchen island, staring at my training journal. She was preparing my usual post-workout protein shake, measuring powders with the same careful attention she brought to everything lately. Her helpfulness should have been a relief. For years, we'd maintained polite distance, the awkward dynamic of step-siblings thrown together by our parents' marriage when I was 16. I stared at the last entry for a long time, pen hovering over the page. Correlation wasn't causation. I'd learned that in my sports science classes. But the pattern was starting to feel less like coincidence and more like a map I wasn't ready to read. "I just want to understand what's different," I said, accepting the shake she handed me. The familiar blend of vanilla protein powder and frozen berries should have been comforting. Instead, I found myself studying it, looking for something I couldn't name. Maybe that's the problem, Brianna said gently. You're trying to control everything. Some things you just have to trust. Trust. The word sat heavy between us as I took a careful sip. The shake tasted normal, perfectly blended exactly how I liked it. But something in my stomach recoiled, an instinctive tension that made no logical sense. Later that night, I called Jaden, my closest friend from high school, and the only person who'd known me before the family reconstruction, before the pressure, before everything became about Olympic dreams and sponsorship dollars. The shake thing again? They asked, their voice crackling through my phone speaker as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Rose, you're scaring me a little. This isn't like you. What if I'm losing it, Jay? What if the pressure is actually making me paranoid? Or what if you're not? What if your instincts are trying to tell you something everyone else is too comfortable to hear? Jaden had become a sports therapist after their own swimming career ended with a shoulder injury. They understood the psychology of elite athletics, the way pressure could manifest in unexpected ways. But they also understood me. Keep documenting, they advised. If there's a pattern, it'll show up eventually. And if there isn't, well, at least you'll know you're being thorough. I hung up and returned to my journal, adding notes about the conversation, the shake, the way Brianna's eyes had lingered on my face as I drank it. 3 pages of entries now, a growing catalog of good days and bad days, of symptoms that made no medical sense, of a family that preferred psychological explanations to uncomfortable questions. Outside my window, the Phoenix skyline glittered against the desert night. 6 months until trials. 6 months to figure out whether I was losing my mind or whether something far more sinister was stealing my dreams one training session at a time. I closed the journal and tried to sleep, but my mother's voice whispered through the darkness. Trust your body, Rose. It knows things your mind isn't ready to accept.
Brianna's transformation into the perfect, supportive sister happened gradually, then all at once. It started with small gestures, offering to drive me to early morning practices when David was traveling, packing my gym bag with the same precision I usually brought to the task myself. By the 3rd week of my erratic performance pattern, she'd essentially become my training coordinator. I want to help, she'd announced during one of David's financial pressure sessions at dinner. Rose is carrying so much stress. The least I can do is handle the logistics. Linda had practically glowed with pride. It's wonderful to see you girls supporting each other. David nodded approvingly, probably calculating the time savings in his mental spreadsheet of Olympic investment returns. And I should have been grateful, should have appreciated that my stepsister was finally making an effort after years of polite coexistence. Instead, I felt like I was watching a performance I didn't understand. Brianna approached my training support with the same methodical attention she'd once brought to her own swimming career, before she'd plateaued at regional competitions and quietly faded from the sport. She researched nutrition articles, bought supplements I'd never requested, and reorganized my entire hydration system with color-coded bottles for different times of day. Hydration is everything for endurance athletes, she explained, showing me the new system she'd installed in our garage. Different electrolyte balances for pre-workout, during training, and recovery. I've been reading about what works for Olympic-level swimmers. The bottles lined the shelf like a pharmacy display. Blue caps for morning practice, green for afternoon sessions, and red for post-workout recovery. Each one perfectly labeled with my name and Brianna's neat handwriting. This is incredible, I said, meaning it. The organization was impressive, the research clearly extensive. Thank you. But as I reached for a blue-capped bottle the next morning, something cold settled in my stomach. A whisper of unease I couldn't logically explain. The pattern sharpened over the following days. My worst performances consistently followed Brianna's most helpful interventions. The morning she'd prepared my favorite pre-workout breakfast, steel-cut oats with berries and honey, I'd nearly blacked out during sprint sets. The day she'd surprised me with homemade energy balls, scientifically formulated for sustained athletic performance. I'd vomited twice after training. When I mentioned feeling off after consuming things Brianna prepared, the family's reaction was swift and unified. Ungrateful, paranoid, stress-induced obsessiveness. Brianna is trying so hard to support you, Linda said during one particularly tense conversation. She's researching, spending her own money on supplements, rearranging her work schedule. I don't understand why you're suddenly suspicious of someone who's only trying to help. David's response was more direct. This paranoia needs to stop, Rose. You're looking for problems that don't exist. Brianna has never been more supportive, and you're treating her like she's sabotaging you. The word hit like a physical blow. Sabotage. Such an ugly accusation to level at family. The kind of thing that revealed deep character flaws in the accuser. What kind of person suspected their sister of deliberately harming them? But late at night, alone with my training journal, I couldn't shake the evidence building on the pages. The correlation was too consistent to ignore, even if I couldn't understand the mechanism behind it. Day 18. Terrible practice. Couldn't hold my struck technique. Brianna made special pre-workout smoothie with performance herbs she'd researched online. Said she wanted to give me every advantage. Day 19. Much better. Hit personal best time in 100-meter freestyle. Brianna worked double shift, wasn't home when I left for practice, made my own breakfast. Day 20. Disaster. Had to stop mid-set due to nausea. Brianna had prepared recovery drink in advance, said the timing was crucial for nutrient absorption. I started taking pictures of the journal entries, backing them up on my phone. If I was going crazy, at least I'd have documentation of the descent. If I wasn't, well, evidence might become important. The real test came during a family barbecue David had organized for his business associates. The backyard was perfect. Pool sparkling, landscaping magazine ready, the kind of setting that demonstrated success without being ostentatious. I was supposed to be the star attraction, the Olympic hopeful who validated David's investment in family athletics. Brianna had prepared a special picture of her latest hydration creation, something with coconut water and electrolytes that she'd spent hours perfecting. She served everyone else first, making sure they could see her attentiveness, her dedication to my well-being. Rose's special blend, she announced, pouring the pale liquid into a glass with my name etched on it. I've been working on the formula for weeks. Every eye was on me as she held out the glass. David's business partners, Linda's book club friends, neighbors who'd followed my swimming career since high school. The perfect audience for family harmony, for the supportive sister narrative Brianna had been crafting. I stared at the glass, my training journal's patterns flashing through my mind like a warning system I couldn't ignore. Everyone was waiting. David's smile had a sharp edge that suggested my response would be remembered. Actually, I said carefully, I'm trying to stick to plain water today. Training day tomorrow. The silence stretched too long. Brianna's face cycled through confusion, hurt, and something else I couldn't quite identify before settling on wounded understanding. Of course, she said softly. I should have asked. I just thought...
It's thoughtful, I assured her, hating how the words felt like a betrayal of my own instincts. Really, I appreciate everything you've been doing. But David's eyes had gone cold. Linda shifted uncomfortably. The business associates exchanged glances that suggested they'd witnessed something awkward, potentially embarrassing. Later, after the guests had left and the dishes were cleared, David cornered me in the kitchen. His voice was low, controlled, but I could fear the anger underneath. What was that about? What do you mean? The water. The way you treated Brianna. She's been bending over backward to support you, and you humiliated her in front of people. I felt something fracture inside my chest. I just wanted plain water. You wanted to make a point. About what, Rose? That you don't trust your own family? That you think Brianna is... what, exactly? The question hung between us.
dangerous territory neither of us wanted to explore, because putting it into words would make it real, would force us to confront possibilities that comfortable families didn't entertain. "I don't know what I think," I said finally. "I just know something feels wrong." David's expression softened slightly, but not enough. Olympic pressure affects everyone differently. Maybe it's time to consider that sports psychologist Linda mentioned. A sports psychologist. Another way to frame my suspicions as mental instability, to redirect the conversation away from uncomfortable patterns and toward the safer territory of stress management. That night, I sat on my bed with the training journal open, adding another entry. Outside my window, Brianna's bedroom light was still on, casting a square of yellow across the backyard pool. I wondered what she was thinking about, whether she felt hurt by my rejection of her careful preparation, or whether she was planning her next helpful gesture. Day 21. Family barbecue. Refused drink Brianna prepared. David angry about paranoid behavior. Everyone thinks I'm losing it. Maybe I am. But the correlation is still there, still real, still terrifying. I closed the journal and tried to convince myself that tomorrow would bring clarity, that the good days meant I was getting stronger, more mentally tough, that the bad days were just obstacles to overcome. But deep in my chest, in the place where my mother's voice lived, I knew I was documenting something far more dangerous than performance anxiety. I just wasn't ready to name it yet. The episode that changed everything happened on a Thursday morning in March, during what should have been a routine endurance set. I'd been in the pool for 45 minutes, working through Coach Martinez's carefully structured workout, when the familiar wrongness crept back into my stroke. But this time, it didn't stop at coordination problems. The nausea hit first, rolling through my stomach like a toxic wave. Then the tremors started in my hands, spreading up my arms until I couldn't maintain my grip on the lane rope. My vision tunneled, the pool lights becoming distant stars, and suddenly I was underwater, not sure which way was up. Coach Martinez was in the pool before I could process what was happening, his strong arms pulling me to the surface as I gasped and retched chlorinated water. He hauled me to the pool edge with the efficiency of someone who'd handled drowning swimmers before, but his face showed something I'd never seen there before. Genuine fear. "Rose, stay with me. Look at my eyes." I tried to focus on his weathered face, but everything kept sliding sideways. My pulse hammered against my eardrums, too fast, too chaotic. When I tried to speak, only a strangled sound emerged. "We're getting you out of here," he said, lifting me from the pool like I weighed nothing. "Now." The pool office was a small, cluttered space behind the main deck, filled with kickboards and timing equipment. Coach Martinez wrapped me in towels and guided me to the old leather chair he used for parent conferences, his movements careful but urgent. "How long has this been happening?" His voice carried the authority of someone who'd coached elite athletes for 2 decades, someone who knew the difference between normal stress and training and something else. "Few weeks," I managed, my voice still shaky. "On and off." "How?" I explained the pattern, good days and bad days, the inconsistency that baffled everyone, including myself. Coach Martinez listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. "Rose, I've been coaching since before you were born. I've seen anxiety, overtraining, eating disorders, every kind of performance issue you can imagine. What just happened in that pool, that wasn't any of those things." Coach Martinez's jaw tightened. "David's not the one who almost drowned in my pool today. You are. And you're my athlete, which means your health is my responsibility." The conversation with David that evening was everything I'd expected and worse. He stood in our kitchen, still wearing his expensive suit from another successful day of property development, his face cycling through frustration and barely controlled anger. A team physician? For what exactly? We've already spent thousands on medical evaluations that found nothing wrong. Those were basic physicals, Coach Martinez replied calmly. He'd insisted on being present for this conversation, another gesture that felt like protection. Dr. Santos specializes in athletic medicine. She'll look at things other doctors might miss. Like what? The question hung in the air, dangerous territory none of us wanted to explore directly. Coach Martinez glanced at me, a silent communication that said I needed to be the one to speak. Like why my symptoms don't match any normal training stress pattern. Like why some days I'm fine and other days I can barely function. David's expression shifted, the successful businessman's mask slipping to reveal something harder underneath. You think someone is what? Deliberately making you sick? I think something is making me sick, and I'd like to know what. Rose. His voice carried the tone he used when closing difficult real estate deals, patient but immovable. You're under enormous pressure. Olympic trials are 4 months away. The sponsorship deals, the media attention, the financial investment we've all made in your career, it's natural to feel overwhelmed. This isn't feeling overwhelmed, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're creating problems to avoid facing the pressure. And now you're dragging Coach Martinez into conspiracy theories about your own family. The accusation stung because part of me wondered if he was right. Maybe I was losing my grip on reality. Maybe the stress had finally broken something fundamental in my psychology and I was seeing patterns that didn't exist, threats that lived only in my imagination. But Coach Martinez stepped forward, his voice carrying decades of authority. David, I've seen Rose train for 3 years. I know her baseline, her normal responses to pressure, her mental toughness. What happened today wasn't anxiety. It was medical. You're not a doctor. No, I'm not. That's why we're consulting with one. The appointment was scheduled for the following week, despite David's continued protests about wasted money and enabling paranoia. As Coach Martinez walked me to my car that evening, he stopped beside the driver's door. Rose, I need you to know something. In 20 years of coaching, I've learned to trust my athletes when they say something is wrong. Your instincts matter. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I drove home through the Phoenix evening, desert mountains silhouetted against the dying light, thinking about trust and instincts and the difference between paranoia and survival. In my rearview mirror, I could see Coach Martinez standing in the parking lot, watching until my taillights disappeared. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. Dr. Reina Santos had the kind of presence that filled a room, not through volume or dramatics, but through the quiet authority of someone who had spent 30 years helping elite athletes distinguish between normal adaptation and dangerous dysfunction. Her walls were covered with photos of swimmers, runners, and cyclists she'd guided through Olympic campaigns, their medals catching the afternoon light streaming through her windows. Tell me about the episodes, she said, settling into her chair with a clipboard and kind of focused attention that made me feel heard for the first time in weeks. Everything. Don't worry about whether it seems important. I walked her through the timeline, the patterns I'd documented, the way my symptoms seemed to correlate with specific circumstances. Dr. Santos took notes without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated she was actually listening rather than waiting for me to finish so she could offer predetermined explanations. The tremors you describe, are they fine motor control issues or more like shaking? Fine motor control, like my hands forget how to grip properly. And the metallic taste? Before, during, or after training? Before. Sometimes hours before I even get to the pool. She nodded, adding more notes. When I finished my account, she set down her pen and looked directly at me. Rose, what you're describing doesn't match any normal training stress pattern. The symptom cluster, the timing, the inconsistency, it suggests external factors rather than internal psychological pressure. External factors, the clinical phrase for what I'd been afraid to name directly. We're going to run comprehensive tests, blood work, neurological evaluation, cardiac function, and a few others. I want to rule out every possible medical cause before we consider psychological factors. The relief was so intense, it made me dizzy. Finally, someone was taking my physical symptoms seriously rather than immediately redirecting to mental health explanations. How long for results? Most tests will be back within a few days. Some specialized panels take longer. She paused, studying my face. Rose, is there anything else you think I should know? About your environment, your routine, anything that's changed recently? I thought about Brianna's helpful interventions, the color-coded hydration system, and the way my symptoms seemed to follow her most caring gestures, but speaking those suspicions aloud felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Dr. Santos made a note. Anyone else with access to your food or drinks? Just family, and Coach Martinez during training sessions. I'd like you to keep a detailed log for the next week. Everything you consume, when you consume it, who prepared it, and any symptoms that follow. Think of it as data collection. Data collection. A scientific approach to my unraveling health, a way to transform fear into measurable information. The tests themselves were exhaustive. Blood draws, EKGs, neurological assessments that tested my reflexes and coordination. Dr. Santos was thorough to the point of seeming excessive, but I was grateful for the attention after weeks of being told my concerns were psychological. 3 days later, I was sitting in my car outside the medical building when my phone rang. Dr. Santos's number. Rose, I need you to come in. There are some results we need to discuss. Is everything okay? A pause that lasted too long. Just come in. Can you be here in an hour? I drove back to her office in a haze of anxiety and anticipation. The waiting room felt different this time, more serious, less routine. When Dr. Santos called my name, her expression was careful, professional, but I could see concern in her eyes. Some of your blood work came back with unexpected findings, she said, settling behind her desk with a thick folder. I've ordered additional tests to confirm, but I wanted to discuss the preliminary results with you. What kind of findings? Trace amounts of substances that shouldn't be in your system, medications you've never been prescribed, at levels that would explain many of your symptoms. The room went very quiet. I could hear my pulse in my ears, the soft hum of the air conditioning, the distant sound of traffic outside, but Dr. Santos's words seemed to echo from a great distance. What kind of medications? Benzodiazepines, primarily, anti-anxiety medications, also some antihistamines and muscle relaxants. Nothing that would be immediately life-threatening at these doses, but enough to significantly impact athletic performance, coordination, and cognitive function. I stared at her, my mind racing through implications I wasn't ready to process. How would those get into my system? That's what we need to determine. Could be accidental exposure, could be contamination of supplements or food sources, could be... She hesitated. Could be intentional. Intentional. The word sat between us like a bomb neither of us wanted to detonate. I'm ordering a comprehensive toxicology screen, Dr. Santos continued, and I strongly recommend you be very careful about what you consume until we have more information, especially anything prepared by others. I drove home in a mechanical silence, Dr. Santos's words looping through my mind. Benzos, anti-anxiety medications. I thought about Linda's bathroom counter, the orange prescription bottles lined up like sentries, the little white pills she took during stressful family conversations, the same medications now showing up in my bloodstream. That evening, Brianna was in the kitchen when I arrived, preparing what had become her signature gesture, my post-workout recovery smoothie. The blender was running, filling the space with familiar noise, and she looked up with that bright smile that had become so constant lately. Perfect timing! I added some new supplements I found online, supposed to help with muscle recovery and mental clarity. She held out the glass, pale purple from the mixed berries, exactly the way I usually liked it. But now I saw it differently. Saw the way her eyes lingered on my face as I took it, the slight tension in her posture that suggested she was waiting for something. Thanks, I said, accepting the glass. I'm actually not that thirsty right now. Maybe I'll save it for later. Something flickered across her expression, disappointment, frustration, calculation. It was gone so quickly I might have imagined it, replaced by understanding concern. Of course, the new supplements might be too much on an empty stomach anyway. I carried the smoothie to my room, set it on my nightstand, and opened my training journal to a fresh page. Instead of workout notes, I wrote down everything Dr. Santos had told me, every medication name, every implication. Outside my window, the Phoenix evening was painted in shades of orange and pink, beautiful and deceptive. Just like everything else in my life lately. My phone buzzed with a text from Jaden. "How did the appointment go?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Can you come over? I need to tell you something." Jaden arrived 20 minutes later, their sports therapy training bags slung over one shoulder and worry written across their face. We sat on my bedroom floor, the untouched smoothie still sitting on my nightstand like evidence in a crime I wasn't ready to name. "Medications," I said without preamble. "In my blood. Stuff I've never taken." Jaden went very still. "What kind of medications?" I walked them through Dr. Santos's findings, watching their expression shift from concern to something harder. As a sports therapist, they understood pharmacology, understood how different substances affected athletic performance. "Benzos would explain the coordination issues," they said quietly, "and the inconsistent symptoms. Depending on dosage and timing, you'd have good days when the levels were low and terrible days when they were high." But how would they get into my system? We both looked at the smoothie on my nightstand. Jaden's voice was careful when they spoke again. "Rose, who has access to your food and drinks?" "Family. Coach Martinez during training sessions, but Coach wouldn't." "No, he wouldn't, and you know it." Jaden's eyes met mine, which leaves family. The word hung between us, heavy with implications neither of us wanted to explore, but the logic was inexorable, terrifying in its simplicity.
Linda takes Ativan, I said finally. For anxiety. The bottles are in their bathroom. Easy access. But she wouldn't. Linda's not malicious. She's anxious and overwhelmed, but she's not cruel. What about Brianna? I thought about my stepsister's helpful transformation, her careful attention to my nutrition, the way she'd inserted herself into every aspect of my training support. The color-coded bottles, the specialized supplements, the smoothies and shakes prepared with such thoughtful precision. "She's been helping so much lately," I said, the words feeling like betrayal even as I spoke them. "Everyone's so proud of how supportive she's become." When did the help start? I thought back through the timeline, correlating Brianna's increased involvement with the onset of my symptoms. The overlap was almost perfect. About a month ago, right around when the episodes began. Jaden was quiet for a long time, their therapist training probably warring with their friendship instincts. Finally, they spoke with the kind of careful precision that told me they'd been thinking the same thoughts I was afraid to voice. "Rose, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about the answer. Has Brianna benefited from your performance problems?" The question cut straight to the heart of what I'd been avoiding, because the answer was obvious once someone was brave enough to ask it directly. "David's been talking about reallocating training funds," I admitted. "If I don't make trials, the money goes back into the family pool. Brianna's been pushing for him to help her start her own business. And if you're not competing at your peak level, the sponsorship deals fall through, the Olympic dreams die, and suddenly there's a lot of family resources available for other pursuits." We sat in silence, the implications settling around us like smoke. My phone buzzed with a text from Brianna. "Hope you're feeling better. Made extra smoothie if you want it later." I showed Jaden the message. They read it twice, their expression darkening. "We need more evidence," they said finally. "If this is what we think it is, you need documentation that can't be dismissed or explained away." Over the next week, I became hyper-vigilant about everything I consumed. I started preparing my own meals, filling my own water bottles, avoiding anything Brianna offered with polite excuses about trying a new nutrition plan. The change in my behavior didn't go unnoticed. "You're being weird about food again," Brianna observed during Friday dinner, her voice carrying just enough concern to sound genuine. "Are you developing some kind of eating disorder? The pressure can do that to athletes." David looked up from his phone, attention suddenly focused. "What kind of weird?" "Just controlling about who prepares things, where food comes from. It's not healthy behavior." I felt the familiar sensation of being cornered, of having my self-preservation instincts reframed as pathology. "I'm just trying to be more mindful about nutrition." "By refusing to eat anything anyone else prepares?" Linda's voice was soft, but worried. "Honey, that sounds like paranoia." There was that word again, paranoia, the clinical term that transformed reasonable caution into mental illness, that made my growing suspicions sound like symptoms rather than survival instincts. "Maybe we should revisit the sports psychologist idea," David suggested, his tone gentle but firm. "Before this gets worse. Before this gets worse." As if my caution was the problem, not whatever was causing my symptoms in the first place. The breaking point came during David's monthly business barbecue, an event designed to showcase family stability to his professional network. The backyard was perfect as always. Pool sparkling, landscaping magazine ready, the outdoor kitchen equipped for entertaining. David's associates mingled with drinks, discussing market trends and investment opportunities, while their wives admired Linda's garden. Brianna had prepared a special pitcher of her latest hydration creation, something with coconut water and electrolytes that she had spent the afternoon perfecting. She moved through the crowd like a gracious hostess, filling glasses and accepting compliments on her thoughtfulness toward her Olympic hopeful sister. "Rose's special blend," she announced when she reached my table with pitcher in hand. "I've been working on the formula for weeks. Perfect mineral balance for athletes." Every conversation had stopped. 20 pairs of eyes watched as Brianna held out a glass filled with pale, innocuous-looking liquid. David's business partners, Linda's book club friends, neighbors who'd followed my swimming career since high school. The perfect audience for family harmony. My training journal's patterns flashed through my mind. Every bad day, every episode, every time I'd felt my body betray me after accepting Brianna's helpful preparations. Dr. Santos's words echoed, "Be very careful about what you consume." "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet patio, "I'm sticking to plain water today." The silence stretched too long. Brianna's face cycled through confusion, hurt, and something I couldn't quite identify before settling on wounded understanding. "Of course," she said softly, but her voice carried just enough volume for everyone to hear. "I should have asked first. I just thought, after all the research I've been doing to help you..." The implication hung in the air like an accusation. Here was the caring sister, trying to support her Olympic-bound sibling, being rejected for reasons that made no sense to reasonable people. David's colleague, a prominent attorney named Mitchell, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Family dynamics can be challenging during high-stress periods."
Especially when there's so much pressure on young athletes, added his wife, her tone carrying the kind of psychological insight that came from watching too many sports documentaries. I felt the conversation shifting around me, my refusal being transformed into evidence of my mental instability rather than reasonable caution. Brianna's helpful gesture was becoming proof of her saintly patience with her difficult sister. "I appreciate everything Brianna's been doing," I said carefully. "I'm just trying to simplify my routine right now." But the damage was done. The guests returned to their conversations with the slightly strained politeness that suggested they'd witnessed something uncomfortable, possibly embarrassing. David's jaw was tight with controlled anger. Linda looked mortified. And Brianna, cleaning up her rejected preparation with wounded dignity, had successfully painted herself as the victim of my unreasonable suspicions. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the kitchen was cleaned, David cornered me in the hallway outside my bedroom. "We need to talk about what happened tonight. I just didn't want the drink. You humiliated Brianna in front of people.
She's been trying so hard to support you, and you treated her like she was trying to poison you." The word hung between us, spoken out loud for the first time. Poison. Such an ugly accusation, the kind that revealed deep character flaws in whoever was willing to voice it. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to. Everyone could see what you were thinking. And if you're really at the point where you suspect your own family of trying to harm you, then we need to get you professional help immediately." Professional help. Another way to frame my growing suspicions as mental illness, to redirect the conversation away from uncomfortable possibilities and toward the safer territory of psychological treatment. The medical appointment is next week. Let's see what Dr. Santos finds. Fine, but if these tests come back normal, if there's no physical cause for your symptoms, then we're addressing the psychological component whether you like it or not. I nodded, knowing that normal test results would confirm everyone's suspicions about my mental state. But abnormal results, those would change everything. In my room, I added the evening's events to my training journal, documenting the public humiliation, the family's reaction, the way my caution had been transformed into evidence of my paranoia. Outside my window, Brianna's light was still on, casting its familiar square of yellow across the backyard. I wondered what she was thinking about. Whether she felt hurt by my rejection of her careful preparation, whether she was planning her next helpful gesture, or whether she was calculating how much longer she could maintain her performance before someone finally asked the right questions. My phone buzzed with a text from Coach Martinez. "How are you feeling? Ready for tomorrow's practice?" I typed back, "Better when I control what I eat and drink." His response came immediately. "Trust your instincts. We'll figure this out." I set the phone aside and tried to sleep, but my mind kept circling back to Dr. Santos's words about external factors, about substances that shouldn't be in my system, about the need to be careful about what I consumed. In the darkness, I finally allowed myself to think the thought I'd been avoiding for weeks. What if my family was trying to destroy me? And what if the only person who could save me was myself?
Dr. Santos's call came on a Tuesday morning while I was sitting in my car outside the Aquatic Center, building courage for another training session. Her voice was steady, professional, but I could hear the gravity underneath. "Rose, the comprehensive toxicology results are in. I need you to come in immediately." "How bad is it?" "We'll discuss everything in person. Can you be here in 30 minutes? I drove to her office with my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mother's voice whispering through my memory. "Trust your body. It knows things your mind isn't ready to accept." Dr. Santos was waiting with a thick folder and an expression I'd never seen before. Part physician, part advocate, part someone preparing to deliver life-changing news. "The levels are significant, Rose. Dangerous levels of lorazepam, diphenhydramine, and cyclobenzaprine. These are serious medications that would explain every symptom you've experienced." "How serious?" "Serious enough that whoever is administering them knows exactly what they're doing. The dosages are calculated, not random, not accidental. High enough to impair your performance and coordination, but not high enough to cause obvious medical distress that would prompt immediate hospitalization." The clinical explanation hit like ice water. Someone had been systematically poisoning me with scientific precision, titrating the doses to destroy my athletic performance while avoiding detection. Rather than immediately confronting my family with the evidence, I decided to catch Brianna in the act. Coach Martinez and Jaden helped me plan it with the precision of a military operation. "We need video evidence," Jaden insisted. "Medical proof is powerful, but visual evidence of the actual poisoning will be irrefutable." The setup was simple. I would ask Brianna to prepare my pre-practice hydration, while Coach Martinez and Jaden secretly recorded from the pool office, which had a clear view of the preparation area. We installed a small camera in the gym bag I always left on the bench.
positioned to capture whatever Brianna did to my water bottle. Thursday morning, I walked into the aquatic center knowing this would either vindicate my suspicions or prove I'd lost my grip on reality. "Brianna, could you grab my water bottle from the bag? I forgot to fill it." She smiled, that bright, helpful smile I'd grown to fear. "Of course. The blue one, right? Your pre-practice bottle?" I watched from across the pool deck as she approached my bag, bottle in hand. Through the office window, I could see Coach Martinez and Jaden positioned with their phones, recording every movement. Brianna glanced around quickly, checking that no one was watching. Then she reached into her purse and withdrew a small plastic baggie. With practiced efficiency, she unscrewed the bottle cap, tapped white powder into the water, and swirled it gently until it dissolved. My heart stopped. There it was, visual proof of my stepsister deliberately poisoning my water, her movement confident and routine. This wasn't the first time. This was a practiced ritual. She screwed the cap back on, shook the bottle lightly, and walked back toward me with that same supportive smile. "Here you go. Make sure you stay hydrated today." I accepted the bottle with hands that barely trembled, forcing my expression to remain neutral. "Thanks. You're always so thoughtful." "Anything for my Olympic sister." 10 minutes later, in Coach Martinez's office, we watched the video replay. The evidence was undeniable. Brianna deliberately adding unknown substances to my drinking water, her movements showing familiarity with the process. "We have her," Coach Martinez said quietly. "Clear documentation of intentional poisoning." But as I stared at the screen, watching my stepsister poison me with casual efficiency, something broke inside my chest. This wasn't just evidence anymore. This was confirmation that someone I'd trusted, someone I'd lived with for 9 years, had been systematically trying to destroy my dreams and potentially my life. The betrayal was so complete, it took my breath away. I chose the setting carefully. Sunday family dinner with Aunt Susan visiting from Tucson. Linda had prepared her usual elaborate meal, the dining room glowing under the chandelier David had installed to impress clients. Everything looked perfect, exactly the way our family had always presented itself to the world. "I have something to share," I announced as everyone settled into their usual seats. Brianna looked up from her phone, eyebrows raised with polite interest. David continued cutting his steak with surgical precision. Linda smiled expectantly, probably hoping for news about improved training or sponsorship developments. I set my laptop on the table and opened the video file. This was recorded Thursday morning at the pool. The screen showed Brianna approaching my gym bag, withdrawing the plastic baggie, adding powder to my water bottle. Her practiced movements, the way she checked for witnesses, the casual efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. The dining room went completely silent. David's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Linda's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against her plate. Brianna went very still, her face cycling through expressions too quickly to track. "This is fake," she said finally, her voice high and strained. You staged this somehow." I placed the toxicology report beside the laptop. Medical proof of lorazepam, diphenhydramine, and cyclobenzaprine in my bloodstream. Your mother's medications, Brianna. Linda made a sound like she'd been physically struck. "My medications? Those are locked in." "Are they?" I asked gently. "When did you last count the pills?" The color drained from Linda's face as she realized the implications. Her anxiety medications stolen and weaponized against the stepdaughter she tried to love. David was staring at the video, his face reflecting the collapse of everything he'd believed about his family, his daughters, his carefully constructed life. "Brianna," he said quietly, "is this real?" My stepsister's facade finally crumbled. 9 years of resentment and jealousy poured out in a torrent of justification and rage. She gets
everything. The training budget, the attention, the future. What about me? What about my dreams? You threw away my college fund for her pool time. Your college fund paid for your education, David said slowly. You dropped out. Because I couldn't compete with perfect Rose, golden girl Rose who never fails, never disappoints, never needs anything but more money for her selfish dreams. Aunt Susan leaned forward, her voice cutting through Brianna's breakdown like a blade. So you decided to poison her? The words hung in the air, stark and undeniable. Brianna's mouth opened and closed, her justifications crumbling under the weight of what she'd actually done. I never meant to seriously hurt her, she whispered finally. Just slow her down. Level the playing field.
6 months later, I stood on the starting blocks at the U.S. Olympic swimming trials in Indianapolis, my body finally my own again. The crowd noise faded to white static as I adjusted my goggles, feeling the familiar ritual center me in a way that had been impossible during those dark weeks in Phoenix. My hands were steady. My breathing was controlled. The metallic taste that had haunted my pre-race preparations was gone, replaced by the clean anticipation I remembered from before everything went wrong. Lane 4, 200-meter freestyle finals. The race that would determine whether the last 10 years of my life had been worth the price I'd paid to swim it. In the stands, Aunt Susan sat with Coach Martinez and Jaden, their faces reflecting a pride that felt different from the conditional approval I'd grown up with. These were the people who'd believed me when believing required courage, who'd stood by me when the truth threatened to destroy everything familiar. David wasn't there. He was in family therapy with Linda, working through the systemic failures that had allowed Brianna's poisoning scheme to continue for months. The court-mandated sessions were part of his plea agreement, cooperation in exchange for avoiding charges as an accessory after the fact. His willful blindness hadn't been criminal, but it had been devastating. Linda sent flowers to my temporary apartment every week, cards filled with apologies I wasn't ready to accept. Her anxiety medications were now locked in a safe, monitored by a therapist who specialized in prescription abuse within families. She'd testified against Brianna with tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking as she described finding empty pill bottles hidden in her daughter's room. Brianna was serving 18 months in minimum security, her plea deal contingent on psychological treatment and restitution for my medical expenses. The sentencing hearing had been surreal. Watching someone I'd lived with for 9 years accept responsibility for systematically destroying my health while maintaining she'd never intended serious harm. I just wanted to slow her down, she told the judge, her voice small and hollow. I never thought about what it would do to her body long term. Detective Ramirez had explained that cases like mine were more common than people wanted to believe. Family members using prescription medications to control or harm relatives, hidden behind facades of care and support. The perfect crime, because who suspects someone of poisoning you while they're helping you? But now, standing on the blocks with clean blood and clear vision, I could focus on what mattered. The water stretched before me like a blank page, ready for me to write the ending to a story that had nearly been stolen from me. The starting signal echoed across the arena. I dove into the water that saved me, that connected me to my mother's memory, that gave me purpose when everything else fell apart. My stroke felt like coming home. Smooth, powerful, exactly what my body remembered how to do when it wasn't fighting chemical interference. 50 meters. I was exactly where I belonged, cutting through the water with precision honed through years of dawn practices and sacrifice. The other swimmers were strong, but I was swimming for more than just time. I was swimming for every day Brianna had stolen from me, every moment of self-doubt her gaslighting had created, every time someone had told me to trust others instead of trusting myself. 100 meters. Halfway through, and I could feel the rhythm my mother had taught me to find. The space between effort and flow where champions lived. My flip turn was textbook perfect, my underwater dolphin kick generating the kind of speed that made coaches take notice. 150 meters. The pain in my muscles was clean now, honest. The result of pushing my body to its limits rather than fighting chemical sabotage. I could hear the crowd noise building, sense the other swimmers falling behind as I found another gear. The wall rushed toward me with crystalline clarity. I touched with everything I had, immediately turning to look at the scoreboard as the times populated. American record, Olympic trials champion, Olympic team member. The pool erupted in chaos, but all I could hear was silence, the perfect quiet that comes when justice finally catches up to truth. Coach Martinez was in the water beside me before I could process what had happened, his weathered face split by a grin that made him look 20 years younger. "That's what you swim like when no one's poisoning you," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt like coming home. Later, in the quiet of the warm-down pool, I floated on my back and stared at the arena ceiling. The Olympic rings gleamed above me, no longer a distant dream, but a promise I'd finally earned the right to keep. My phone buzzed with messages, media requests, congratulations from former teammates, sponsorship offers that would fund the next chapter of my athletic career. But the message that mattered most was from Dr. Santos. "Proud of you. Your body knew what it needed. You just had to learn to listen." That evening, I sat in my hotel room and opened a new journal, not for documenting symptoms and suspicious patterns, but for recording the goals that felt possible again. Olympic preparation, post-competitive career plans, and the swimming camps I wanted to establish for young athletes who needed advocates. I thought about making a video, sharing my story with people who might be living their own versions of family betrayal and systematic gaslighting. But first, I needed to swim. I needed to remember who I was when no one was trying to take that away from me.
The Olympic rings tattooed on my shoulder no longer felt like they were burning. They felt like armor, protecting the dreams that had survived everything designed to kill them. If you're reading this, if something in your body is screaming that things aren't right while everyone around you insists you're imagining problems, trust yourself. Trust your instincts. Trust the voice that knows the difference between stress and sabotage. Because sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones working hardest to destroy you. And sometimes survival looks like refusing their help, even when that refusal makes you look paranoid to everyone watching. Your body knows things your mind isn't ready to accept. But when you're finally ready to listen, when you're finally ready to demand the truth, even when it threatens to destroy everything comfortable, that's when you discover how strong you really are. That's when you learn to swim again. The admission was everything I'd needed and nothing I'd wanted. Proof that my instincts had been right, that my family had been gaslighting me while one of them systematically destroyed my health and career. David's phone was already in his hand, dialing 911. His voice was hollow when he spoke. "We need police. There's been a domestic assault situation." As we waited for the authorities, I looked around the dining room where we'd shared hundreds of meals, where I'd been welcomed as David's stepdaughter 9 years ago, where Brianna and I had learned to navigate the awkward dynamics of blended family life. Everything looked the same. The chandeliers still cast warm light, the family photos still lined the walls, the carefully chosen furniture still spoke of success and stability. But the foundation had shifted, revealing the rotted support beams underneath. Justice, I was learning, didn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just felt like survival. 2 years after the toxicology report changed everything, I'm sitting poolside at the Phoenix Aquatic Center where it all began. The water looks exactly the same, crystalline blue, lane ropes cutting perfect lines, but I see it differently now. This pool isn't just where I trained, it's where I learned the difference between intuition and paranoia, between family loyalty and survival. The Olympic silver medal hanging in my apartment tells part of the story, but the real victory was simpler, learning to trust the voice inside me that knew something was wrong when everyone else insisted everything was fine. Brianna completed her sentence 8 months ago. She sends letters sometimes, rambling apologies that circle around accountability without ever quite landing there. I don't respond. Some bridges, once burned by betrayal this calculated, can't be rebuilt with words. David and Linda are still in therapy. We have dinner occasionally, careful conversations where we all pretend the foundation of our family wasn't rotten from the start. Linda keeps her medications locked away now, but the damage to her trust in her own judgment runs deeper than security measures can fix.
David has learned to ask different questions, to listen when someone says they're being hurt instead of immediately explaining why they're wrong. The hardest part wasn't the poisoning itself. It was how everyone I trusted became part of the system that nearly destroyed me. How reasonable adults can choose comfort over truth. How family love can become a weapon when it's conditional on silence. But I learned something else too. Your body keeps score even when your mind makes excuses. That metallic taste, those trembling hands, the way my stroke fell apart on certain days. My nervous system was screaming warnings I almost didn't let myself hear. Coach Martinez retired last year, but his words echo every time I step onto a pool deck. Trust your athletes when they say something is wrong. He's training coaches now, teaching them to recognize the difference between performance anxiety and something more dangerous. Dr. Santos still checks in regularly. She's publishing research on family prescription drug abuse in athletic settings, using my case as part of a larger study. Turns out I wasn't the only young athlete whose symptoms were dismissed as stress, while someone close to them was systematically undermining their health. I've started speaking at swimming camps and youth sports conferences, sharing the parts of my story that might help other athletes recognize when something isn't right. The message is always the same. Your instincts matter. The adults in your life might be wrong, even when they love you. Especially when they love you, because love can make people desperate to avoid uncomfortable truth. If you're reading this, if something in your gut is screaming while everyone around you insists you're fine, listen to that scream. Document everything. Find someone outside your family system who will believe you. Get medical tests. Demand answers. Your body knows things your mind isn't ready to accept. But when you're finally ready to listen, when you're finally ready to demand the truth, even when it threatens to destroy everything comfortable, that's when you discover how strong you really are. The pool still calls to me every morning. Not because swimming is my escape anymore, but because it's where I learned that survival sometimes looks like refusing help from people who claim to love you. Where I discovered that the most dangerous betrayals come wrapped in care and concern. Where I found my voice by learning to trust the one I'd always had. Trust your body. It's trying to save your life.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.